So anyway, we were talking about the U.S. involvement in.
Yeah, so the U.S. was not as involved as they portray in the movie. They were definitely there, and they were definitely involved in the modernization of Japan
yes.
and trade. There was a lot of trade between them, but they were not actually in battle.
Yes, as I mentioned, so Japan, as is alluded to in the movie, the Japanese culture was far beyond others in its lower stages. Like in early prehistory, they were much more advanced. However, they got stunted because of this entire isolation business when they couldn't do any trade with anyone, and so they got way behind the Western nations. Definitely much less primitive than like the Native Americans, but far more primitive than the Western nations as far as technology and things like that.
And also, the actual last battle in the movie,
It was real.
It was real. Was
yes.
it as big as?
Yes, it actually
they portray
it actually is
was it more of a
fairly
skirmish?
true to history. They even get the figures right of the soldier. Like according to my research, there were 500 samurai present, as they state in the movie. The battle was called, let me recall, the Battle of Shiroyama.
Okay.
Yes, and it was the end of the samurai. 15. No, the date.
It would be 1870 something.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, because
You're right. That's wrong. My brain just made up.
And I also have heard that the fact in the movie they portrayed the samurai as having given up firearms, and I've read that that's not completely true. They were still using. They had not completely abandoned firearms just because they viewed that as dishonorable.
Yeah.
They were still using firearms like in this rebellion.
Yes.
But in the movie, I can understand.
Yeah, they have to make a
it's a movie
distinction.
about samurai.
Well, that's the other thing. Why
to get audiences to come, you wouldn't go to see a movie about samurai where they're firing guns. You'd want to see them with samurai swords.
Exactly.
So I kind of get that.
Exactly. And so, other historical references. Oh, let's talk about the samurai themselves. So they, if you're not familiar with the true historical samurai, they lived by something called Bushido Code. They talk about it in the movie. One of the most referenced traditions of the samurai that is addressed in the movie is something called seppuku, where it was the belief of samurai at the time, if you were defeated in battle, you were so shamed that you had to end your own life, and it was a very honorable thing to do. And so seppuku, they're constantly committing seppuku almost to the point of absurdity. Like Katsumoto is filled with like 18 bullets and dying, and he's like, I gotta commit seppuku because I lost.
And this alludes back to the relationship between Katsumoto and the general at the very beginning. The general,
exactly, he was committing seppuku.
He kills himself, and then Katsumoto cuts off his head. As I guess he does stab himself. He does.
Yeah, he asked him for help ending his life. So they don't. The Japanese culture views suicide in a vastly different way than Western culture does. We see it as a sin, even something that could send you to hell. But it's because I think the very strong emphasis on the value of human life in Western culture. We are very attached to the intrinsic divine, worth of human life, and not the Japanese. I think they did have a respect for human life, but maybe not to that extent. To them, honor transcended life, even human life, and so to retain your honor was even more important than retaining your life. So if you were shamefully defeated in battle, then you had to end your life, just right there. And
one other historical point that in the movie is portrayed a little bit inaccurately is the armor of the samurai was not as... It was a little bit more modern than they portrayed in the movie.
Oh, really?
Where it's just like that hard stuff. They had advanced a little bit.
I see.
They weren't beyond that stage. It was a little bit more modern armor that they were using than is portrayed in the movie. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. They wanted to. The armor looks cool in the movie. I think
it does. It looks great. And on the other side, moving away from the samurai, you've got the Imperial Japanese Army, and they are, of course, are applying Napoleonic style tactics that were used like during the American Civil War and whatnot, and obviously also during the Napoleonic Wars. And I can relate to that very closely because my family have done a lot of Civil War reenactment in this area, and so it's funny. I was sitting there and I was like, I kind of knew what that felt like, especially when they had the scene when the guy was like scrambling to reload. You know, I've had that happen where like the enemy line is advancing on you and you've got to get a little bit more heat on them. And the rifles were accurate. I was looking at them. I think those were Springfield models. I saw Enfield models, and then it looked like there was a breech loader at some point. It had to be a breech loader because they were putting so much lead downfield, like especially in the Tokyo scene. Like there was like 10 of them, and they just like kept shooting. And in my experience, like a volley goes out, and it's gonna be like 45 seconds until you see anything else, and they just kept bang 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 bang. It's like they had 6 shooters, just like it was a little bit excessive. Unless it was breech loaders, I didn't get a good look.
So do you want to touch a little bit on like specifically positives versus negatives, and to be a little bit more critical?
So let's talk about we've bragged on
we've kind of gotten a little bit out of order of what we were doing.
Well, yeah, it's fine. So positives and negatives. Let's talk about what we loved about the movie, and then we'll do our best to nitpick it.
And we can have like mixed aspects. If you know, things that aren't necessarily bad or.
Yeah. So let's do good, bad, and then we'll do neutral.
You do your positives first.
So let's start with positive. I'll do a positive, and you do a positive, and we'll bounce back and forth. I love the way this movie is set up from a scene structure standpoint. I've done a lot of scene structuring in my short life, and this is just set up phenomenally compared to a lot of other movies. It is to the point, and yet it has time to address deep themes. Like, it's a long movie, right? But it has a lot to say. There's just a lot of content. It uses its runtime well. Yes, every single second of that movie is. Like, if you miss one line, you need to rewind and watch it again because they don't waste any of your time. We did, you know? They don't waste any of your time in this movie. Everything that happens is something that is important to the movie, which is just good writing right off the bat. That's what a good writer does. And so that's something.
And that's kind of similar, I think, to the movie Gladiator. And
Gladiator meandered a little bit more.
It does, a little bit more. But Gladiator does have a good structure, I think. And ironically, one of the screenwriters is actually the same guy who John Logan wrote this, and he wrote Gladiator. Gladiator meanders a little bit more with it. I would agree, but they both do a good job of there's just so many good one-liners that you can't miss. Like, there
are a lot of good lines. But like if you're ever writing a story, something like this, and ask yourself the question, what does this scene do? And if you get an answer like, well, it's establishing the tone, or it's telling the reader what it's like to live in, or like something like that, then just cut the scene. Just cut the scene, and you need to be doing those, like, you need to have a scene that's like, has an answer, like, if it's not like that advances the story point, and you need to be establishing the tone and telling the audience about the setting while you're doing that. You need to be double tasking, and that's what this movie does beautifully. Every second is just jam packed with so much.
So one of my biggest positives of this movie is definitely the cinematography in the movie.
Oh yeah, John's a big fan of cinematography.
I don't know. Let me check who it was.
He's a big fan of cinematography. He's like, man, look at the angle of that shot. That's one thing I don't think.
I gotta get the name. I feel like it's somebody that I know.
I'm more writer oriented. I'm more left brain oriented, where I'm like, oh, the dialogue. I like
that stuff too. I'm just the cinematography.
But John's over here. He's like, man, the cinematography.
John Toll, who I believe also did Braveheart. He's done some other historical.
He was the cinematographer.
Sweeping epics. Yeah, his name's John Toll. He's done some. He's known for kind of doing historical epic period movies. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's just so many sweeping shots where it's like, in the final battle, it gives you this wide shot. You're in, like, the interior of the battle, and then it just doesn't zoom out, but it cuts to this wide shot of, like, the whole battle, and you see everybody fighting, and it's just amazing. And a couple others that come to mind is when it'll start, like, kind of below a hill and rise above it, so you see the whole village where Algren is held captive. And the third one is just the scene towards the beginning, even of the very opening shot of like the Japanese countryside and the village, and a long shot of the village, and then also the shots of Algren sailing into the harbor on his ship. There's just a lot of great wide epic shots in this movie throughout the whole movie.
Gotta agree.
Yep.
Gotta agree.
We can do maybe 3 each.
Another positive. I want to save themes for later because I feel like themes aren't a positive. They're just a thing that happens. Because I feel like there's people who will argue with you that a movie is good or bad based on the themes, and I don't think that's accurate. Anyway.
No,
themes. I don't think themes.
You can just disagree. You can just not be as you can like not just be as
Well, like,
into a theme.
to be more accurate, what I'm getting at, it's like, have you ever had that person where you're like, oh, that's not a very good movie, and then they look at you and they're like, well, it's a movie about friendship and the importance of holding on when it all seems lost, and that movie can be about those good things.
Also, it can't be good. It can't be very. It can also not be good.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It can be about like really good topics and just like still suck.
Yeah,
still be a really bad movie. And so you have to have a good movie and then good morals, and then you've got something to talk about. One of my favorite scenes in this movie.
This is a positive.
Favorite scene. Such a good... And it's hard to name a favorite scene in this movie because almost every single one you're getting chills down your spine. This one really did it for me. Algren is kind of... is watching these two children spar with their katanas. They're doing like kendo. And they invite him to like try. And... he's kind of half doing it, like looking around because like, oh, I'm gonna get in trouble here. And sure enough, he does. Like one of this huge, skilled samurai dude shows up and is like, and then
it's funny because he expects Algren to drop the sword.
He tells him to drop the sword in Japanese, and then Algren's like, but also I think he kind of understands, and he's like, no, I'm not gonna drop the sword, and so. Algren has only just come to the village and he just like sucks at swordplay, and so he gets destroyed in 2 moves and just the crap beat out of him, and and then the guy knocks away the sword, but then Algren reaches for it again and he gets back up. And the great thing about the scene like that where the guy gets back up is kind of stereotypical, but like this proceeds to happen like 4 times in a row where he just beats the crap out of Algren, and Algren just like even slower crawls to his feet. One of the best ones is when he hits him right on the nose, and then as he's getting up in the rain, you can just see blood welling up out of his nose. I don't know how they did that so good. It looked like a broken nose for real. And it just really shows you the determination and the value of just continuing to relentlessly get up, even when you suck at what you're doing. Because all of those samurai looked at that, and you could just see the respect in their eyes. It was just phenomenal. Love that scene.
Yeah. So another positive to me is just the way the character arc of Algren and how he kind of goes from he's kind of lost in life, doesn't know what his purpose is or whatever, because he obviously has like all this PTSD and stuff. And then he's like obviously an alcoholic and all that.
Right.
And then he's captured. He kind of goes over to Japan just for the money, really.
Yeah.
He's not really over there to become a better person. He doesn't really have any real reason to be over there other than for the money that he's going to get paid. And he obviously gets captured by the samurai, and he begins to realize what it really means to live, and what he's there for, that he was obviously sent there for a reason. Yeah, he finds purpose, and he just has a really great character arc. And
I think he learns to forgive himself too.
Oh, yep.
He learns to forgive himself.
Yeah, he's kind of seeking. Yeah, he's definitely in kind of.
The movie has a spiritual undertone. It's not one of those movies that's like sledgehammering you over with political or religious messaging, but it has like a subtle religious undertone. That's a good one.
So the character arc of Algren is definitely a big positive, and we can go one more, I guess.
The historical accuracy of the feel of the time period, like the architecture and the dress and the references to other historical events that are also accurate. It's just and the international relations that are accurate. It's great. They did their homework on this one. We can pick apart like tiny details. Like Algren wasn't a real person. Like, well, it's a story. Yeah. So really appreciate that they did their homework on it.
Yeah, like the Tokyo setting is really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
In the village too.
Oh, the combat choreography is off the chain.
Oh, it's the best. Like the final battle, if you haven't seen the movie, is like it shows you them fighting up in close. Like it just cutting to these different kind of individual battles. Battles. Like it'll show Katsumoto fighting, then it'll show Algren fighting, then it'll show some random samurai fighting, and eventually Algren and Katsumoto are back to back fighting people. Like they each have 2 swords and stuff. And obviously the choreography is awesome, but also it's the best it's one of the best battles. It is. Like the final battle.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's up there and the style of it is similar to the style of in the battle of in Braveheart, the battle of Stirling Bridge, the battle of Stirling. It's very similar, where it's just in the heat of the battle.
It's a bittersweet ending when you watch all of these characters that you've spent this 2.5 hour movie growing to love, just getting absolutely like thrown in the meat shredder in front.
I mean, there's this one guy, the guy who he kept on beating Algren down. He goes to like his last.
He takes like 14 bullets. One of the the greatest part is when he takes that bullet to the stomach, and then they like are trying to help him up.
Yeah, he just gets up,
and he like shoves him up, and he goes, and then he just like spits blood out. He's like, and then he's just fine. He just spits. It's like he regurgitated the bullet and spit it out.
And it also has one of the most satisfying villain kills when they take out the U.S. Colonel. I think his name's Bagley in the movie. I mean, he's trying to kill Katsumoto in the final charge, and Algren sees it, and he takes one of his swords and just throws it right at
sword.
It's like,
and you know what the great thing about that was is that is the right way to throw a sword. It's the right way to throw it, and this is
what's the wrong way?
This is one of those little details that gets me so irked, because in movies when somebody throws a sword, they take the sword and tell me if this is wrong. You who are watching, respond. Tell me. They take the sword like this, throw it, and then it turns and then it stays straight.
Yeah.
Gravity doesn't work like that.
He throws it just dead.
Gravity doesn't work like... And there was a technique that medieval swordsmen used to throw swords where they'd take it by the hilt and it was straight and it was like a spear. It was over their head, and you threw it like a spear and it was straight. And that's exactly what Algren does. And it, it's a part of that, the homework they did. Really respect that. Nobody threw swords like this, like a tomahawk, like a hatchet. It just... Have you ever seen that movie where the person's like... Yeah, and then it just comes out straight, and your brain
like
glitches.
In Braveheart, there's a scene where he just like winds it up like this and just heaves it.
It
looks cool.
Like, your brain glitches because you're like, your brain's like, gravity doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it could just happen. It could just land like in front of the dude and not actually, because it could just.
It would go end over end is the point, and like it always just goes straight.
The hilt could hit him instead of the blade.
Exactly.
If you feel like.
But that. even if it went over end, I would respect it more. But like it goes like this, and then it stops, and then it goes forward. Yeah. And that, I mean,
And the biggest, my final, I'll go one more positive, and we can talk about some negatives, which there aren't many.
There really aren't.
One of my biggest positive, perhaps, is that it's a Tom Cruise movie, but it's not like a Tom Cruise movie. He's not like the center. Like he doesn't have to be like running around and doing crazy stunts for it to be good.
This is Tom Cruise's best performance, and this is post Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah.
Post Top Gun Maverick, this is Tom Cruise's best performance because he isn't Tom Cruise. He is Nathan Algren. He becomes that character. You really feel it. Yeah. You do. Okay, so negatives. Very few.
Yeah, whatever.
Very few negatives. Yeah. Here's one of my negatives. It's not even about the movie. They rated it R for some reason.
Yeah.
Why did they rate it R? There's like this scene where
Well, we gotta get the rating descriptor. So the rating descriptor was for strong violence and battle scenes. Yeah. So it wasn't for any kind of like...
But like there was nothing... Like the battles were no more intense than something you might see in like the Avengers or something like that. Yeah, I mean
there's just some... There's one scene where a guy gets his head cut off.
Yeah, but like see his head roll off. Oh, yeah.
You do see his head roll off. Mm-hmm. And there's one scene in the battle that's a little bit brutal where Tom Cruise's character is in the middle of the battle and he like cuts this guy's face down the middle of his face, which is pretty gnarly.
It's pretty brutal. But
those are the only. But every other kill is either a stab.
Yeah, but there's blood is hardly ever
or an arrow kill.
Like
or
every
getting shot.
Every now and then there's a blood splurt. Like every once in a blue moon you see blood and you're like. Oh,
so this is more a negative on the ratings board.
Yes, it is. It is. Okay. And there's like one scene where like a girl's like washing her hair and her like she's got her arm exposed and it's like, oh no, But the reason that I have a problem with it is because R ratings are so inconsistent. Because I watched this movie as one of the first R-rated movies I ever watched, and I was like, oh, that's what an R-rated movie looks like. And then I watched another movie that, and it was much, much worse. And I was like, I have been lied to.
Yeah, there's definitely. I mean, there's hard R versus like light R.
If you compare this movie to like American Psycho, it's like it doesn't even. It's unfair that they're in the same league. So anyway, that's my complaint.
It's kind of
Do you have a complaint?
Do you have any more?
I have one more. Yeah.
Okay, go with yours and let me.
Again, with my reenacting experience, the guns discharge way too much. Like, there's 10 guys, and they can put downfield, like, 50 rounds a minute. It doesn't make any sense. They're constantly shooting, and they're constantly missing. And, and they're never shown reloading. It doesn't make, like, they'll do a volley and then they'll go into battle and then they'll be like shooting. And it's like, how did you have another cartridge in there at all? And then same thing with the cannons. There was like 5 cannons and they all shot once, and then it panned to the samurai and like, kid you not, like 25 cannonballs hit the ground.
Yeah, that was a little bit unrealistic.
And it was like, how on earth did that work? And they're constantly, they never show reloads. They're always shooting. It's like like every gun is a Gatling gun. It's like what's that game? Sea of Thieves, where you just like pop in a ball and cock back the thing. You're like, bang, thoop, cock, bang.
So one of my only negatives I have is there's one transition between the ninja scene where they're ambushed by the ninjas, and they win this battle. It then transitions to a scene. It's a good scene that it transitions to, where Katsumoto and Algren are talking about like this tree that's been blossoming, and Katsumoto thinks it's like, he thinks there's nothing better than a perfect blossom, like it's one of his favorite things in the world. But it transitions very suddenly. It's like it goes from like this battle, and immediately literally the last thing is them chanting. And
look
then
at this.
It's like they're like this. They're like, ah, and then it cuts, and it's like this real quiet atmosphere. Blossom. It was a bit sudden. It was just a bit.
As you can see, we are nitpicking.
Yeah, that's a nitpick.
We're nitpicking. Anyway. I'm like saying the gun shot too fast, and he's like,
that's the only thing I can think of.
There was one scene that they didn't cut perfectly
in the story, the story of it. There's nothing in the story. Really,
no, like think about the criticisms we have, like that they didn't rate it right, which is not for the movie. Yeah. That the gun shot too fast, like, duh, and then that they didn't cut one scene right. That's
I just feel like they could have maybe just had like a scene in between where they're maybe recovering from the battle.
Yeah, I don't know.
Which maybe they had. They just deleted it for runtime.
I don't know. It was good.
I can't really think of any other big criticisms. The ending shot has always been a little bit interesting. How it ends on his face. Tom Cruise's face.
He's like, no, he doesn't actually do that. His beard is great in this movie,
it's just him.
His beard and his hair. It's like it's really. I gotta get the charger real quick.
I just feel like maybe they could have. I don't know. Maybe it could have been like a zoom out shot of the village instead of just ending on his face. But then again, he is the main character, and it makes sense. I just it's not. That's a nitpick once again. Which
of course brings us to the argument: who is the last samurai?
Yes.
What is that referring to, John? Thoughts?
My opinion is that it's the last samurai is Katsumoto. I've always been of.
So there's three camps in this. This debate. There's
the first camp. Well, you
go ahead.
The first camp is that the last samurai is Algren. The second camp is that the last samurai is Katsumoto, and the third camp is that the last samurai refers to the whole clan or the whole village of samurai that are in the movie.
Because the plural and the singular of the word samurai are the same. Yeah. So you could infer that it's like, I'm actually of the same mind that it refers to Katsumoto, because he was the last samurai that was alive on the field of battle. Yeah. And Algren is accepted by the samurai, but he is not like quite a samurai.
No. You have to be more. You would have to be of like samurai descent to be a samurai.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if you were. I feel like if he qualified as a samurai, then also the children who had been raised as samurai could qualify as samurai, and then like it wouldn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think Katsumoto was definitely
is the last samurai. He's a Chad. I've seen online people criticize this movie for like, because it includes Algren as a character. They should They say that the studio was thinking that it wouldn't succeed without a white character in a central role. I think that is such a garbage criticism, because this movie promotes Japanese culture in such a wholesome way. How could you look at this and be like, oh, they're ruining it with this one white guy who is in it? Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. Because literally the whole time they're showing how wonderful Japanese culture is, and how tough and disciplined and insanely skilled all of these Japanese men are, and the women, by the way.
Yeah, she gets a kill.
She gets a kill
in the ninja battle. But
she's also just like really disciplined. Yeah. But getting to that, we're going to talk about themes. I have a couple things in mind. What do you want to talk about as far as themes?
Well, I mean, we already kind of talked about the Nathan Algren's kind of character arc of forgiveness is kind of a theme. Finding your purpose.
And, I think that when you're zeroing in on themes for this movie...
I mean, what do we think is like the central theme?
That's what I was thinking. I think that this movie really... Because, of course, there's this divide, right?
Yeah.
There's the divide between the new world and the old world. And the way I see it, the principal difference between these two camps is their outlook on religion, because you have this very secular camp, right, in the Western world who's kind of left their religion behind, and then you've got the very religious samurai. They have this strict code that they abide by. They have this very focused vision through which they see the world. And the Westerners in the movie, at least that might not be historically accurate, but the Westerners in the movie do not see it the same way. They just do not. They've kind of lost all of their vision. They're kind of very materialistic. And I think The Last Samurai is a great lesson on how our culture, how our heritage, how our customs and our beliefs can help us frame our world in a much more healthy way.
Yeah, I think I think maybe the central theme, which is obviously you kind of got on it there, is the difference between the old world and the new world. Right. And how they can be joined together to make one.
There you go.
Unifying
world. Like the movie kind of alludes that the solution here is not to just stay behind in all of the old ways, but to move forward.
But it's also not to go forward too fast.
To move forward while respecting your past.
Yeah.
And then incorporating the proper things into it.
Katsumoto kind of sums it up with the line where he gives Algren the sword, and it has like an inscription on it. Japanese, and Algren says, "What does it say?" And he says, "I belong." He's telling him what it says, and the sword says, "I belong to the warrior in whom the old ways have joined the new." And that I feel like that is the theme of the movie.
And the emperor,
the old ways and the new ways can coincide, and they can
coexist. The emperor doesn't bring back the samurai. He doesn't even repeal the ban on the samurai. He just tells everyone we have to remember our heritage, and he rejects one of their deals. And I think that if you had to sum the theme up into one word, it would be honor.
Yeah. And the very first word is honor.
No,
he talked at the very beginning. There's a voiceover by Simon
The last
Graham,
word
the
in the
English
first sentence is honor.
Yeah, he talks about how the islands of Japan were formed, and how they were formed in legend, and that honor has always been the basis of Japanese society.
Yes, and they talk about. I think the movie is a great lesson on how honor impacts your life, how living by a code is the proper way to live. Algren, while he's living in there, he talks about how the samurai wake up and for all of their day they dedicate themselves to the perfection of whatever they pursue. And at one point, someone, I forget, is it Katsumoto who's something along the lines of, what will happen when it's gone? Or no, I can't remember the line. Basically, Algren, somebody alludes that it's not going to be necessary once that honor system is gone, and then Algren's like, what could be more important? Because it shows, it reframes his whole world in a new way. So I think honor, the forgotten honor of our ancestors, a righteous code. I think that's all of the themes, and those themes resound with me really deeply on a deep level. And just sticking by those morals and that code, as shown by his resilience when he was getting the crap beat out of him by a samurai. Oh, and before we finish, we have to talk about the subplot with him and the lady samurai Taka.
Oh, yeah. So basically, once he reaches the village at first, and he's staying in the house of Taka, who's the wife of the man he killed in the fog battle, he kind of has an antagonistic relationship with her. She doesn't really want him there. She constantly complains to her brother Katsumoto that
only that one time.
Yeah, one time. It might be implied that she does it more. But yeah, one scene in the movie, and she complains to him about why he has to be in her house, and that she'd rather kill herself than have to bear the shame of having the.
Because imagine, I felt so bad for her. Yeah. Imagine that scenario: your husband goes off to battle, and this other guy comes back and starts hanging around, and he's goofily trying to assimilate into your culture, and it just so happens that this guy, he stuck your beloved husband in the neck with a broken spear, and then he's just and
that's not necessarily a negative of the movie. I feel like Katsumoto was wanting her to realize something.
I don't know. No, Katsumoto says he has no idea why he's always there. But I want to talk about Taka because I actually really respect and like her character because she is so composed during that whole movie. In fact, all of the Japanese people are, but especially her. And you can tell just behind her eyes, it's great acting too, by the way, that it's tearing her up. Just seeing him in her house and being with her children, but she she has a duty, and she understands that, and she sticks to that above everything, and she stays disciplined. She reminds me of the last psalm where it talks about the woman of great value.
Yeah.
I feel like even though she's, Japanese, and probably doesn't even know about that psalm, that she like encapsulates it perfectly in the way that she behaves in that movie, because she's always doing something useful. She's very composed. I liked her character a lot.
Yeah, she's a great character
Yeah.
for sure. I think that I always go back and forth between her and Weijo, who's the samurai who at first despises Algren.
Yep.
They both are kind of similar. They both despise Algren. They don't understand why Katsumoto is sparing him, but they come to respect him.
Yeah,
and
I think that Taka comes to love him in a way.
Oh, yeah.
Because she, in the end, like at the very end before he leaves, she realizes she doesn't want him to go.
Yeah.
And because, in the movie, he apologizes to her and he expresses his regret that he killed her husband, and she ends up forgiving him too. So it's a lot about forgiveness.
Yep.
Like, he forgives himself. She ends up, which is a really hard thing to do, she lets go of all of her animosity towards him and truly views him in a new way. It's a really hard thing to do, especially for somebody who's committed murder, especially against someone special to you like that. And so after she's let that go, she's able to, it implies she lives a life with him afterward.
Yep. So do you want to do like final thoughts?
Final thoughts.
It's like, yeah.
Watch this movie.
Yeah. Watch it.
Watch it. It's really good. I call this, a lot of people would disagree with me, I call this time in which movies were made the golden age of movies, between like 1995 and like 2009 or like 2011 or something like that. Somewhere in that 15-year period.
Well, there's so many good movies that came out in that like period of this genre, like of historical movies specifically, but also just, I mean, you could go forever.
It's like when storytelling got really sophisticated, but they weren't super into the computer graphics. And I know you're gonna be like, oh, the 3 Star Wars movies they made then, but like, other than that,
I mean, historical movies, you got so many. You got like Braveheart, Last Samurai, Gladiator, The Patriot,
you have
We Were Soldiers.
The Kingdom of Heaven,
Kingdom of Heaven,
all of the Lord of the Rings movies.
All the Lord of the Rings movies.
Like, I guarantee you, like, go look at like a really good movie, and there's like an 80% chance it was made in that period. It's just, unless your taste in movies is garbage, in which case, I'm sorry, I feel bad for you. But it's really good. Do you have any last thoughts on this?
Just a really good movie. Some people, I don't look at it and look at the length and think that it's not going to be, it's not worth it, because it's definitely worth it. It's only, it's 2.5 hours long, but it goes by fast once you get into the movie. It's not one of those long movies that just drags on and on and on and on.
Like, if you're going to watch this, like, turn out the lights, put away your laptop and your phone, and just, like, watch it. Because there's, like, I've gotten to this habit where when I'm watching a movie, I'm, like, half doing something else. Like, everything in our generation, we have to, like, be, like, super stimulated. But just, like, pay attention to this movie. It has so much to teach you. It is, in a world of sludge movies, it's something that is really, because if we keep reviewing movies, we're gonna come across something that sucks, and you're gonna miss us sitting here talking about how good it is, because we're gonna just get to rip on a bunch of terrible movies. We should next one we should do a terrible one and just rip on it the whole time. Like what's a really bad movie? I don't even know.
American Psycho.
That's a terrible movie. That's a terrible movie.
Oh man, and I think he hates it more than I do. I mean, I don't like it, but
I would say
you seem to really not like it.
And I'm not.
Now
saying,
let's not get into like
So I have moral problems with the movie, as
definitely.
anyone does with a conscience. But that's not even the reason that it's bad.
We'll probably want to.
It's just, if you took out all of the shameful, just pervertedness of that movie, it would still be a bad movie.
Yeah,
it's just not set up well. There is one.
That
scene
doesn't
in
mean
that movie
that
is good.
Yeah. We don't want to get too much into the movie, but that's not to say that every movie that has like bad people in it is bad. Is a bad movie.
Yes,
but that one just
it's bad on every level. Like, you look at every level,
except Christian Bale,
and you see garbage. On the other hand, on The Last Samurai, you look at every. It's like, this is a perfect way to end. It's like a really well-forged katana, because you see Japanese smiths would layer the steel over itself again and again to make sure it was like super strong. This movie is made of like 10 different layers of awesome. Like whoever forged this out like
So-
an epic
So
samurai
what do you have to
blade.
say to the director, Edward Zwick?
Edward Zwick.
What's your message to Edward Zwick?
My message to Edward Zwick,
Director of The Last Samurai.
director of The Last Samurai, is make more movies like this. Because I will watch them.
Hey man, he's it's one of the better. Yeah, he's a good writer. He's done some other good stuff. If you haven't seen Legends of the Fall, that's a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
He also did Glory, which is a good Civil War movie. He's done some other good ones, but this is definitely his best. Definitely, his
It's
best
the magnum opus.
movie. Yeah, he did a good one called Blood Diamond, but not nearly as good as It's not nearly as good.
It just you watch this movie and it makes you want to be a better person.
Yeah.
It's that kind of movie. So anyway, we've talked your ear off enough. Go watch it. Thank you for hanging with us. Hopefully it won't be the last one. See ya later.